She made history at the Citadel, broke ranks in Congress, and never shied away from a fight, even with her own party. Now she's one of the most talked about and unpredictable voices in American politics. Today's guest, Congresswoman Nancy Mace, a trailblazer from South Carolina's Low Country, with a story backed by grit, survival, and resilience, while shattering nearly every glass ceiling along the way. From Ballard Studios in Washington, D.C., it's 13th and Park.
The hard things that are necessary, we either do it or we'll pay the price down the road.
That often is missing in politics.
We have to solve everything.
It's a nightmare.
You and I can differ, but that doesn't mean you and I cannot be friends.
I have faith in the American people.
Those are the facts.
The Illuminati right there. Aliens could have invaded and nothing would surprise me at this point.
We went from North Korea to M&M. That's a lot, man.
What's in this tea?
Well, Congresswoman Nancy, nice to have you on 13th and Park. Let's set the stage a bit. Let's go to your first tour of duty at the Waffle House. And I think it was in Ladson, right?
Right,
North of
Ladson, South Carolina, exit 203.
And from there, eventually, you made your way to the Citadel after the Shannon Faulkner decision, the Supreme Court decision, and graduated as the first female graduate in the Corps of Cadets.
Yeah, that's
and eventually, after that, wrote a book. Pat Conroy said it was the best book ever written about the Citadel. In the Company of Men, a Woman at the Citadel. And in that book, as you lived it, you described what it was like to be that woman, right?
Right.
And the hazing and the doubts and the scrutiny.
Well, we forgot one little part. I'm also a high school dropout.
Oh,
I come from a place where I was just in a spot where I didn't think I would ever make it. And I didn't really believe in myself. So my mission at the Citadel was to prove to myself I could make something. I would go through an experience like that, face all of the challenges, and not give up on myself. So for me, it was almost like this chip on my shoulder. Come hell or high water, I was getting out of there alive. But it teaches you about grit. And I didn't know I was going to be a member of Congress or an elected office. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. But to be in this political era with the kind of animosity that's in politics now, you gotta have some grit. You gotta be fearless if you're gonna do the right thing for the American people.
But you talk about gritting your way through this experience. There was a description, the Jew, the black, and the chick.
All up into a bar.
Right. It was Evan and I think Alan Brooks. And you kind of had to band together a little bit because you were so completely unique in that class in the Citadel, right? What was that like, those days when you kind of got together and it was like you against the world?
Well, if you were in the minority, you clung together. That would include gay cadets too, because I had some gay friends that would go there. They were trying to make themselves straight, trying to make their fathers proud of them. And so we had this gaggle of people that didn't quite fit in. You have to have a team, you have to have friends, you've got to figure out how you're going to make your way through. You can't do anything alone in life.
But you had additional pressure. Your dad, Emory, the much decorated brigadier general, is the commandant of the Citadel, right?
Yeah.
And you've described your father as your hero. So you got an additional sense of pressure that's going into all of this.
Well, even at 84, he still tells me that I'm going to fail every election. So his version of having his youngest daughter succeed means he's still going to haze my ass in perpetuity, to make sure that I am driven by that fear of failure, that he's always riding my tail. He became commandant the second year that I was there. He made some changes. He actually made the system tougher. It's kind of like having your parent be a teacher or a principal at your school. People don't like the changes. And so because they can't attack the principal or the teacher who's your parent, they attack you, the student, the kid, which is what happened. I mean, I tried to go see him one time in his office and he threw me out in a fit of rage. So, I mean, he's still making me do life on my own. But that's the value of independence and responsibility and accountability. That's huge these days. I mean, people are begging for that, voters of their elected officials. Again, good lessons. I didn't know how valuable those kinds of lessons would be, but he's in part the reason I am the way that I am, why I'm just tough as nails, don't give a shit sometimes. I'm going to do the right thing no matter what. I mean, I was doing 5:30 a.m. runs on the weekends in first grade with him and his
first
Army
grade?
Yeah, with him and his Army Rangers. And I was running a 5.5-minute mile by middle school.
Wow.
So he didn't treat me like I was probably supposed to be treated. Just because I was a young woman, it didn't mean anything. I had to perform just as good as anybody else did.
Yeah.
And again, a valuable lesson in life. Life is not fair.
And it's not fair for a lot of reasons. And there are many other things in your life, one in particular that you've been very outspoken about, which is fetal heartbeat bill, where you were fighting for the exceptions of rape, incest, life of the mother on an abortion bill. And you talked about your own personal experience way back when you were 16 years old.
Unfortunately, as a woman, when that happened at a young age, I still carry guilt.
Yeah.
I still, as a 47-year-old woman, blame my 16-year-old self.
Yeah.
And I told that story in 2019 for the first time because we were doing a fetal heartbeat bill and they didn't have those exceptions.
Right.
I think we were the first state in the country, South Carolina, quickly followed by Georgia, who put the exceptions in for life of the mother, rape, and incest, which was something we did on our part. But back in February, I gave another speech and I found myself as a survivor of another incident again. And I'm thinking to myself, I've got good family, I've got great kids, I'm successful in business, successful in politics. The wind at her sails. Find yourself in this really shitty situation where I'm being abused. And this time it was physical abuse and other things that I uncovered. And I'm just like, how did this happen again? And so I've been praying about it a lot. And I've, sought my faith in these moments, these really tough moments. And my pastor says my radar's broken. So that's the one thing that I have not gotten right. And I'm willing to admit it, but I'm not the only one struggling with that.
Did you hear from a lot of other women around the country when you shared your story and continue maybe to this day?
Yeah. No, I hear from women all the time, and they're of all ages. And I mean, I just had a woman show up at my office today. She doesn't live in my district. She lives in Arizona, came to my office in tears.
Wow.
Because she had a similar experience and she's struggling right now and doesn't know where to get help. And so their struggles are my struggles too. And I've lived it. I'm currently living it right now. And when I first went to folks about being physically abused, they said, well, we're just not going to investigate this. And I'm like, wait a minute, all these bruises on the left side of my body, what do you mean we're not going to investigate it? And what do you mean I'm being threatened to be arrested? What do you mean I'm being threatened to be investigated? I mean, that's the kind of system some women walk into when they want to come forward with abuse. And it's unfortunate, but it's also why I want to burn the system down and start over and say, we can do better. We can do so much better.
Advancing to where we are right now, you're described as fiscally conservative and socially tolerant. I think that's the right word.
Yeah.
And that sometimes puts you at odds with your own party, right? And I think back to your career.
Yeah.
And you kind of always, in a way, taken on the system to improve the system. Is that kind of independent streak something that we need more of, not just here in Washington, but across the board?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been the one who's taken on my party for the reckless spending. I mean, we have tens and trillions of dollars that we're in with our debt and our deficit every year right now. We can blame both sides for that. I think we have to be able to acknowledge when our country or even our own party has a problem and face it head on. To me, that's extremely important to be able to say, wait a minute, nope, I call the balls and strikes against everybody, whether they're Republican, Democrat, or other. I'm constantly holding people accountable because that's what my constituents expect of all of us.
But isn't that holding the party accountable to its values?
We're supposed to be limited government. So why are we telling people who to marry? Right. And even Donald Trump, I have the same positions that he does on social issues. We are the socially sensible party. We are the party that respects and protects women and children, by the way. We've become rabid feminists protecting our women and girls from this gender-bending ideology that has just taken over the Democrat Party. We are the party of peace. We are the party of law and order when you have these activists burning cities down because we're deporting people who broke the law.
Right.
It's so insane to me, but we're now the party of common sense, but I love holding all parties accountable.
You serve as the chair of the House Oversight Subcommittee on Cybersecurity and IT Innovation. So let's talk about the AI Training Extension Act. Why does this country or even the government in this country need to get more kind of with it when it comes to technology and innovation, because it's a fast-moving deal, right? And government by design is a slow-moving.
Our government is.
Right, or at least ours.
Not all governments are, though. We do this because China's about to eat our lunch. And we have to get with it. We have legacy systems that are still on COBOL. I remember when I was 21 and just graduated from college, I taught myself to code when I was in college. And I learned COBOL as a 21-year-old analyst for Anderson Consulting. I knew about 6 different programming languages.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, if I saw COBOL right now, I would throw up. So don't put a line of code in front of me.
We'll give it a test.
I code bots and auto responses on my social media now to talk trash to leftist lunatics. But
for fun.
For fun. I do that in my spare time and for my entertainment only. But we are behind the times, and China's building AI infrastructure very quickly. In fact, I had a hearing on quantum computing yesterday, and we've done very little on AI. Okay, so we want our government employees to know what it is. Check the box.
Right.
You know, I think DoD from a federal agency standpoint is probably leading AI. Cybersecurity is now national security. It's now a form of war. Our DoD and the Pentagon is very much up to speed, and you're seeing the public-private partnership between Silicon Valley and our war fighters who want to ensure that we stay the number one superpower in the world, because if China takes hold, it's going to be bad for everybody. That's why what Trump did in Iran, it was critical. But it is the new frontier, and we have to make sure that we own it. We got to be able to make chips. I mean, we've got to be able to produce and get rare earth minerals. If we can't get them from China, where are we going to get them from? These are all big questions, part of the AI conversation. And then how do we make sure we don't stifle innovation? Because if you start regulating what you don't know, or regulating what you're not sure what the next moment is. I mean, the EU tried to regulate AI and then wasn't prepared for a chat GPT. So their laws didn't even apply to large language models. And you don't want to stifle machine learning. My God, there's so many advances that we can make in healthcare, for example, or waste, fraud, and abuse in the government.
There's also concerns, of course, with technology, the internet, in terms of privacy.
Yeah.
And you're a big advocate of the Take It Down Act, right?
Yep.
We interviewed Senator Cruz, and he was talking about a situation where I think a high schooler, someone had taken her image, manipulated it, and basically shamed her with all of her classmates and whatever else. And her mom discovered there's nothing she could do about it, right? That has to concern everybody. And don't we have to do things like the Take It Down Act and other measures to make sure there's a line we must not and should not cross? Yeah,
absolutely. And I supported that bill. There are children out there today, teenagers, that are committing suicide because of the threat of revenge porn, because of putting their face on a video that might not be them, or maybe it is them and maybe it's real. But there's a state house member in South Carolina, his name is Brandon Guffey, and his son committed suicide 2 years ago. He was there for the Take It Down Act being signed into law by the president, and they were in tears. This has affected them in an enormous way, but there are families like that all over the country who've been affected by this kind of thing. And the president and the first lady, especially Melania, who championed this, did absolutely the right thing. And I remember the day the bill was signed into law, all these women I heard from, you know, I'm reading the law now, I'm reading the bill, and what does it mean for me? And because they've been a victim of something similar. So it was a huge win for women. Again, Donald Trump protects women.
So let's go across the sea for a second. Obviously, the attack on the nuclear facilities in Iran caught the world's attention.
Yeah.
I think by most, if not all measures, it was an amazing operation.
It was.
To see after it was said and done, as it was explained in the press conference with the defense secretary, going methodically through that operation. I'm thinking, oh my God, had any piece of that not been perfectly coordinated, logistically right, or we just had bad luck, bad weather, the plane was not having a good day, none of that would have worked the way it did. How proud were you of America's example of a military that is on its game? And how important was that in sending a signal, not just to Iran, but to the world about, again, a line that should not be crossed?
Well, America is back. That is the message that Donald Trump sent. And Donald Trump sent the message that this is a red line, and if you cross it, there will be consequences. The problem, and one of the reasons I believe that terrorism has grown exponentially over the last couple of years, is because leaders will say, here's a thin line, and if you cross it, by golly, we'll do something. And then nothing ever happens. And Iran has been using its money, partly funded by Biden and Obama. And so we've, in a sick, twisted way, we've probably funded some of this terrorism. And so the way that Donald Trump shut it down, this was unprecedented.
Right.
And to pull off the perfect mission. And today, the headlines on some of the mainstream media to say, well, the weapons they said they didn't have weren't really that destroyed. And it's like, no, it's literally under a pile of rubble, hundreds of meters down. How do you don't know anything, and you're leaking a partial document without any context or information. Can't even verify if it's real or not. But all the reports we've been seeing from this administration and from President Trump have been that this was just a glorious success for him.
In our lifetime, we've seen nothing but turmoil in the Middle East, right?
Yeah.
From beginning to end, nothing but turmoil. Look what's happened over the last month or so. When the president visited Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar. As I understand it, when he came off the plane in Saudi Arabia, that was when the discussion happened with the Crown Prince about Syria. And then, lo and behold, Syria is now back in play, maybe moving in the right direction.
They opened their airspace to us.
So it's a brand new Middle East. And I think the president is fashioning that in a big way. But now you have Iran, who more and more is isolated. I mean, they basically are looking around and say, well, where are our friends? And
where was China? Where was Russia?
Right, exactly.
They were not there for Iran. And the other thing is, too, is that the Gulf states, you have to understand the geopolitics of the Middle East. You get bombed, you're in a Middle Eastern country, you have to bomb in response. Right. But there's this ideological battle happening in the Middle East between the Gulf states that want prosperity and then the secular religious ayatollahs of the world who want terrorism by any means, women in burqas, that whole thing. And so President Trump has far more support than anyone is giving him credit for. The Saudis can't talk about it. The Egyptians can't talk about it. Qatar sure as heck can't talk about it. Right. But there is tremendous support for the U.S. in this endeavor because we're going to help the Middle East. The best thing you can do to clamp down on terrorism is to allow the Middle Eastern countries, the Gulf states, to prosper economically. That's it. And that's what everybody wants. And so there is tremendous support for President Trump. It's not just Israel and the U.S. I mean, there is tremendous support from Middle Eastern countries in seeing that Iran and their terrorism is shut down.
I know that you're not ready to make any declarations, but your name is obviously in the 2026 race for governor in South Carolina. I know the Attorney General just announced that he's officially in and there are others are looking at it or may get in. If you decide to make this run, what is it that you present and represent to the people of South Carolina that is different and that is maybe a refreshingly good way to move forward for the state in the next 4 years?
Results. At the end of the day, it's results. I look at our state. We have the highest state income tax in the Southeast. We're not competing with North Carolina. It's 6.2%.
Wow.
We're not competing with our neighboring states in Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, certainly not Florida. They have no state income tax, and they're about to get rid of their property taxes. We have both. We have had sanctuary sheriffs run amok in South Carolina. We're a red state, and our statewide leaders did nothing when we had a sanctuary sheriff let illegals who are murderers, rapists, and pedophiles out onto the street. But our justice system in South Carolina, and I'm going through it in real time right now, is really a system of injustice. We have like 350 murder cases in Charleston County alone that are just on the docket. The legislators pick the judges. We're only one of 2 states in the country that do that. The lawyers that pick the judges also fund the campaign for the Attorney General, for his reelection, for all of our solicitors, the corruption there. I mean, in my case, for example, my solicitor, her last big fundraiser was headlined by an attorney for 2 of the predators I mentioned in my speech in February. And it's like, how can you as a solicitor go after and prosecute people who are being represented by your BFF? So we've got a system that's broken. It's been this way for decades. What can we get the legislature to do to bring America First and South Carolina First policies across the state? But we've not had a leader statewide who's been willing to take on the toughest challenges. I think people just operate out of fear in the good old boy system, the establishment. What we've always done is just what we're always going to do. And that's not what people want. They want a fighter. And they want someone who's going to bully those who need to be bullied and get the right thing done, which is to show results for our state. And look, like I just saw the mayoral race in New York.
Groundbreaking.
I mean, Florida's full. They're coming to South Carolina. So we have this huge opportunity here. And how are we going to make our state great for others who want to come in and create jobs and have a great education system? I don't want people importing jobs to South Carolina. I want them to be homegrown.
You've done so much already in public life. What is your message to other women who are looking at public service, whether it's elected office or just public service, that you've learned already along the way that could help empower them and give them a chance to really have not just a seat at the table, but maybe at the head of that table?
Stand your ground. Don't give up any ground. Like, you stand there, you stand strong, you stand conservative, you stand your ground, and you will succeed. I mean, at the end of the day, we just got to dig our heels in sometimes and keep doing what we're doing and sound like a broken record until things change. That's what I've done, particularly on women's issues, and you can be a part of that movement. You can be a conservative woman protecting women, and we need you.
Well, Congresswoman, I really appreciate you obviously taking the time to be on the show today, for the courage you've shown from a very early age. You're a great example, not just for women across America, but for everybody as looking for the kind of voice that is unafraid to speak out when it is mandated and needed.
Anytime.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.